Well, hello and welcome to this special episode of the Terri Cole Show, where I'm interviewing Lindsey Ellison, who is a breakup breakthrough coach. And she is the founder of Start Over Coaching, which is a coaching practice dedicated to helping people navigate their divorce or breakup. She's also the author of the best-selling book, Magic Words: How to Get What You Want from a Narcissist, which is how I became familiar with her work, and her latest book, Lessons of a Breakup. You can find Lindsey and on her popular podcast, Unbreakable You, Break Up Without Being Broken, on her website, lindseyellison.com. I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Lindsey, where we're talking about all things narcissists and how to break up without being broken. Enjoy the interview. I'm super excited to welcome Lindsey Ellison to our show. Welcome, Lindsey.
Well, thank you for having me, Terry. So happy to be here.
Right on. All right. So how I got reintroduced to your work, you and I had known each other back in the day, but I got reintroduced to your work through your book, Magic Words. I had so many clients, and I had talked about this in your intro, but I had so many clients who were in relationships, and a lot of them were co-parenting. They were divorced, but co-parenting with a narcissist. And I found your book, and I didn't know that you were the same Lindsey Ellison that I knew, but I started recommending your book to other people, and they were like, wow, this is really helpful. So I would like you to give us a little backstory of why did you create Magic Words: How to Get What You Want from a Narcissist? Just tell us your backstory on this painful introduction into the world of being married to a narcissist.
Yeah, so I was with a narcissist for 17 years, got out of the relationship, got divorced, and I didn't even know I was in a relationship with a narcissist. In fact, I didn't even know what that word meant until, a couple years later after I started doing some research. Fast forward, I started getting into coaching, and I was also having a lot of clients dealing with co-parenting. And I felt as though I somewhat had mastered that co-parenting aspect for myself, that I was just sharing my skills and strategies with my clients. And I really had a process, but I kept looking for a book about, and there's a lot of books on sales. So I was kind of basically taking some sales books. Basically, it's the art of persuasion, right? It's sales 101. When you are in sales, you don't take anything personally, right? But when you're in a relationship or navigating a relationship or trying to have a co-parenting relationship with a narcissist, all of your baggage, all of your past, all of those feelings that you have about this person, it becomes very personal. So I came up with a book. Now, prior to me getting into coaching, I happened to be in advertising. I was in advertising my entire career. So my entire job was about coming up with communication to get someone to buy something. And there is a process in order to do that. So I basically took somewhat kind of advertising 101, and I created a process, which I call MAGIC, and that's an acronym, MAGIC, MAGIC. And I can walk through those steps if you want me to, but that's really how I got into it, because I recognized that people needed a skill, if you will, of how to persuade without getting caught up into the emotions of it. And it's really about the exercise of changing the lens in which you see this person. So many people see narcissists as bullies. I don't. I think they want you to see them as bullies. I see them as very broken, confused, immature children, if you will. You speak to children a certain way. It's the same way that you have to deal with a narcissist. And so once you start to adopt these strategies, however they choose to react, if they have a temper tantrum or not, you'll be in much better, powerful position and having a lot more control over that communication.
Right. What I find interesting, and I will ask you to break down MAGIC. So you're saying that the acronym MAGIC was something that you used prior to this incarnation of helping people with narcissists?
Yeah, I mean, I made up my own acronym that is more applicable to the work that I do. So it's not like MAGIC was another acronym in advertising, but for instance, M is mapping their fears and insecurities. So in the advertising world, we'll call that, a buyer persona.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or a consumer persona. So in my book, I talk about if you remember Jif peanut butter, the tagline was choosy moms choose Jif. That there is so much strategy and focus groups behind that one tagline that probably people don't know, is that they probably mapped a mom's persona of her being worried about sending her kid off to school and not having enough time to make a healthy sandwich, so that they somehow say choosy moms choose Jif. So they somehow got into her fears and insecurities. And then A is assessing, sorry, I'm totally doing this backwards because I haven't done this one. Mapping their persona and assessing their fears and insecurities. So it's the same way, buyer persona and then assessing their fears and insecurities. And the same way you have to do. So in the book, I give a lot of kind of a workbook style Q&A of how to do that for the said person. And the nice thing is you don't need focus groups on this person because you've probably been with them for many years. You know everything about them and what makes them tick.
Yep. It's true. I think that the pushback I've gotten in talking to people about some of the strategies from your book and different ways of interacting with the narcissist, I remember someone pushing back and saying, well, I'm not going to be as manipulative as that person is, and I'm just not going to deal with it. And I remember saying to the person, listen, if you have the luxury of going no contact with your narcissist, go you. Obviously, that would be the first choice. This is for people who cannot do that.
Right.
If you are co-parenting with a narcissist, even though you've divorced them, you can't go completely no contact. It's an impossibility. So we're not saying in the best of all worlds, these are things you want to employ in your life. We're saying if you are trapped in that prison, and that hence why I was looking for a book to come up with strategies and language that people can use. And part of what you share in the book is, instead of approaching someone the way, narcissists have a tendency to be able to, they know exactly what buttons to push. They're very intuitive into what is going to get a big reaction from you. And so what I really appreciated about this book, for those who are looking for something like this, is that there's language based on how they're going to respond. And again, it's all about getting what you want. And what do you want when you have to co-parent with a narcissist? Cooperation, right? Yeah. Let's try to get on the same page. You want what's best for the kids, which you cannot count on a narcissist to prioritize what's best for a kid, because I think if they're really diagnosable, are they capable of doing that is the question, right?
Absolutely. And I think the number one mistake people make when they are trying to negotiate or communicate or engage with a narcissist is getting them to see and have empathy for your situation. Or getting them to see that your point is a bit more rational and logical. And they don't care. And in fact, there's such a power struggle that usually narcissists are intimidated by you. It doesn't look that way, but they are. And so we'll make it about ourselves as we're trying to negotiate. Hey, I'm really caught up at work and can you go get the kids at school? Because I can't, and my boss is yelling at me. They don't care. And we need to let go of that concept that they do care. A nice, healthy, emotional person would have empathy for that. So I use the same example in the book. If I'm wanting you to get my peanut butter, right? I'm selling you peanut butter. Hey, if you don't buy this peanut butter, I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. And if I worked so hard on that peanut butter, it's my grandmother's recipe. And if I don't sell enough peanut butter, I'm going to go to business, right? We don't do that in a business. There is no emotion. It's exactly how you have to communicate with a narcissist. You're trying to come up with words and phrases that best scratch their ego, or whatever what makes them tick. So if you've got a narcissist who loves to rescue and be a hero, so you do have to massage their ego a little bit, which, I've got a couple places in my book where I talk about this part's going to make you want to vomit. You're not going to want to do this.
Yeah.
But you have to stop making it about you. It's about your child or said thing that you're trying to get. And to your point about the concept of manipulating the manipulator, you could look at it that way as if it's dishonest, but most manipulators enjoy getting manipulated.
Interesting.
It's a game. It's a game, and they feel as though they have to win. So that's what I always mean about this isn't about you being dishonest. This isn't about you being a narcissist or you having to do anything out of integrity for you. This is about you speaking their language. And that's really what this is about. Stop speaking your language. You're not together. That's why it never worked, because the two of you could not get on the same page. So if you're going to speak with someone who only knows French, you're going to have to learn a little French.
Yep, I think that that's true. Okay, so in the magic, right, the 5 steps, we've gone through the M, we've gone through the A, move on to the G.
Is goal setting. So always stop and think about what is the goal for communication. So typically when we're talking about a co-parenting, we'll just rattle off something, right? Or they're going to, they might be contacting you and blowing up your phone, let's say. The goal should be, what is my goal in this communication? Is there anything that I need? So it's really for you to get clear on what it is that you want. If the goal is to make sure that he knows you're right and they're wrong, do not engaged, get a new goal, because you're going to lose.
Yep.
Right? And so narcissists are really good about bringing you into the rabbit hole, which I call that narcissistic vortex, right? Which is this little web, and it spins you around like a vortex, like a tornado. Stay on task, stay on goal. So if they start saying, well, you used to do this 10 years ago and your mother's, I hate your mom and blah, 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 and all this stuff, you would then just stay on task, stay on the goal, and just say, all right, are we going to talk about this or not? And it's clearly you're not ready to talk about whether you're going to get the kids. So just come back to me when you have a minute, Then the I is identify your words. So in the book, I give 10 what I call magic words and phrases that you can use. And of course, it's not, I always say, and I really have to footnote this, is it's not prescriptive, right? It doesn't mean you have to use it word for word, but you can mix and match. It's really to kind of get you an idea of the kind of ways you can respond and engage. And then the C is just wrapping up and putting the whole plan together, is about, okay, now we're going to communicate. We've done the M, A, G, I. Now we're going to wrap it up and actually start to use this and have a conversation with this person. And it really, really does work. And I've been divorced for 11 years, and I have to co-parent with teenagers, and I still use my own tools every single time I have to engage. And it really, really does work.
It's so amazing, because I think that in the beginning, it's so unnatural for us to not treat someone the way we want to be treated. It's unnatural, because if you're not a narcissist and you are in a prison with a narcissist because you're co-parenting with them, I think it's incredibly helpful to think outside the box and stop relating to them as if they are like you, because they are not like you. So this is really helpful. I'll have all in the show notes, you guys, where you can get the book. You can get it Amazon and anywhere fine books are sold.
Yeah.
But let's move into what, for you, I know that you had a lot of stuff going on over the pandemic, and you have this new offering that you have called Blessings of a Breakup. Basically, blessings and lessons mixed together of a breakup. So what inspired you to write Lessons of a Breakup?
Yeah. So 2020, as you can imagine, was complete crap for me, and probably for a good amount of people. And I think 2020 was it was just a huge crisis. I call it, to me, COVID, I called it the truth virus. It forced us to look at our truth, and what we couldn't run away. We couldn't get on a plane. We couldn't do anything. We were stuck. So I was remarried for the second time, and it was a pretty good marriage up until, I'd say, the past few years. Things just started to crumble. And a lot had to do with personal reasons that I won't talk about because it has nothing to do with me. But things just started unraveling. Here I am now, a coach that specializes in relationships, right? And narcissism and all things breakup and divorce, and my marriage is starting to fail. Well, I really, unfortunately, attached my career to my personal life a little bit too much. So I had boundary issues with that, figured that part out, right? But through the pandemic, I really went through a crisis where I pretty much had a complete nervous breakdown. My marriage is falling apart. My kids aren't in school. Stuff going on with my ex and his family where I had the kids more. I was basically taking on a burden of everyone else's issues. And I completely lost sight of who I was. So I ended up getting help. Actually, I went to a place in Arizona, and I took myself out of the game for 6 weeks to really understand the childhood trauma and things that I had growing up that I just hadn't fully uncovered. My main trauma, my mom died when I was in a car, when I was 6 years old from a car accident. I thought I dealt with that, and I did, but I had a lot of trauma after that, and a lot of relationship issues with my father, a lot of abandonment, a lot of neglect, and things that ultimately created this wonderful word called codependency, which I'm sure you've discussed. And that never goes away. I really thought you kind of graduated, you know, you've fixed that piece there. And I learned after where I went, that it really is managed as an addiction. It's managed as a thinking problem. And when we are triggered, when life events start to get difficult, such as COVID and my husband losing a job and all these things that were happening, all of those trauma responses were showing up again. And I did not have the tools to manage them. So fast forward, I went to this a place called the Meadows. Highly recommend it. It's one of the best places I've ever, I mean, it changed my life. And I came back from there and I really realized that now I'm healthier and my marriage really, I was trying to fit a square peg in a round hole and it didn't work. But I broke up with someone who I still really loved and cared for. This wasn't a breakup where I'm like, get out and, you know, I hate you. And I wasn't disgusted with him. But I had to do it for me. And it was the healthiest thing for both of us. But it was really like quitting alcohol. I mean, it was, we had a love addicted, co-addicted, unhealthy relationship. I knew I had to get healthy. So did he. But when we broke up, the pain of that breakup was so difficult and so unbearable. I didn't think I would get through it. It was day after day. I'd wake up and I was getting triggered. You know, the song or Christmas or you know a commercial on TV. I mean, you name it. A music video would remind me of him. And so, with codependency and all that I learned, when we are in an unhealthy relationship, we end up making our partner our higher power. And we give up everything. We lose sight of ourselves. And I recognized through this withdrawal that I was still, and even his absence was making him my higher power. So what I ended up having to do was basically find my own. Really find out like, what is my higher power? What is that self-love? All the crap we read about. And I was like, okay, now I got to do the work. And I was looking for spiritual guidance, kind of like the way you were looking for certain things. I was looking for spiritual guidance as it related to a breakup, the pain of a breakup. And I recognized there really wasn't anything out there that was a spiritual thing. So I just started basically tapping into my higher power and asking and praying and please take this away from me. And I really need to footnote too, is that I am not a religious person. Saying the word God or the G word was very hard for me. And in the beginning. And so, you know, like I like to say, I'm not a holy roller at all. So this was a very difficult thing for me to do and say and talk about. But I recognized that I had to do it. I had no other choice. And so what I ended up doing was saying a prayer and then like waiting for the answer. And then I
Mm-hmm.
started to write down everything that was being told, and everything that was coming through me was remarkable. It was like the most calming, beautiful, loving passages. And over, gosh, over the, that entire early part of this past year, I recognize it's starting to turn into a book. I didn't have any intention for it to be a book, but I found it was so, so helpful for me. And then my pain it did go away. I just had the greatest year of my life. And I really think it had everything to do with tapping into that spiritual connection. So that's what that book is about, is to all of these little messages that anyone can get to help them through the day-to-day challenges of breakup pain.
What I think is so interesting, thank you for sharing all of that. I love that. I so see this connection between profound codependency, because so much of codependency, when we think about what it is, it's as if we take on everything. It's as if we, you said that your partner at the time had become your higher power, but the thing that brought you to a tipping point was the overfunctioning, the going back into deeply codependent, overfunctioning mode. And I think that for my therapy clients over the past 25 years, and particularly women who've taken my courses, there's this sense, even if they have a spiritual life, but that it's not safe to give it up to a higher power, that there is the same resistance that you were sharing, Lindsey. I've seen this over and over again for so many different reasons, but partly when you have been highly codependent, and if you're someone who is, I coined the phrase high functioning codependency, because that's the women in my crew who are doing it all and, doing it themselves. So people wouldn't look to them and think they didn't identify with being quote unquote dependent because they were the ones doing the overfunctioning. But there was a misunderstanding about what codependency actually is. And I say it is being, heavily or, super invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the decisions, the circumstances of the people that you care about, to the detriment of your own internal peace, physical, financial, spiritual well-being. And I get really specific on it because, of course, we care about the people that we love. Of course, we're invested in the happiness of those we love. But when it is to the detriment, meaning when the people we love, if your best friend's problem suddenly literally becomes your problem, like the urgency that you experience in fixing that problem is really deep. So I definitely see this connection that you're sharing about what does faith require? Putting something down, believing that I can, Gabby Bernstein, one of my girlfriends, talks quite a bit about, asking for guidance and waiting to hear what comes. And that can be from God, if that's what you believe. That can be from your highest self, if that's what you believe. That can be from, divine energy of the universe, if that's what you believe. But no matter what though you say it is, there is this ability to relax into, to allow, to, I remember talking to Chris Carr years ago, and she was saying, this is surrender has become my new discipline that I'm working on. And this was probably 15 years ago. And I remember thinking, wow, that also is a lifelong experience. So I identify and I agree with what you were saying about your discovery that codependency is not something that gets cured, but really you likening it to being in recovery is exactly my own experience of it and the way that I teach it in my book and the way that I talk about it. So I love that you are shining a light on this in that way, because it is such a confusing thing for most people. They don't get it. But I want to ask you, how can someone, in your estimation, from your experience, how can someone channel their own higher power to sort of receive this divine guidance that we're talking about?
Yeah. So what you were talking about, codependency, and that I think you said Gabby Bernstein was, it's about the act of receiving. It's about asking and receiving. So one of the issues that I learned, especially anyone who's gone through childhood trauma, and I always like to really address, trauma is anything less than nurturing. If we remember it, it can be trauma. It doesn't have to. It's our reality, right? So if it's something that created a shifted of way of a belief system or thinking about us, that's trauma. So typically when we experience trauma as a child, we learn our own coping mechanisms. We have generally lost the ability of getting parented through that process. We don't have adults around to help us cope through that. So we somehow learn a default way of coping, which is actually, I'm going to get it done myself, or I'm going to figure it out myself. So codependency and the birth of it, or the origin of it, I believe comes from distorted thinking that we can do everything ourselves, because that exact distortion is what helped us survive the trauma that we were going through. So just the very act of asking can be very, very difficult for someone like me or an over-functioning codependent. Why? Because I actually had a moment where I was cursing at God, literally telling him, or it, I was so cursing and thinking I had been abandoned. Mm-hmm. Where are you? You help everyone else but me. What is that? Victim, total codependent mindset, right? Mm-hmm. And getting angry. So when you're in that kind of high energetic state, it's very hard to listen. It's very hard to receive. So a word that I love that I learned about codependency is anti-dependency. So we become anti-dependent. I can do everything myself. So the part of surrendering is admitting you can't do it yourself. You have to also recognize you're not freaking perfect. You're going to make mistakes. Also for me, oh, by the way, you don't know how to solve this problem. That's a big one for me, right? I admit I don't know how to solve this problem. I'm feeling lost. So that is really a long answer to your question about how does one channel. It is really just saying and admitting and surrendering that you cannot do this alone. And then I have a check-in kind of process that I do with myself. It has become so routine. And if I miss it, I feel it the rest of the day. But I really just take 10, 15 minutes in the morning and I scan my body for discomfort. Is there pain? Am I worried about something? If it's anything less than joyful, what is that? If I have worry, anxiety and worry is a constant thing that I have, especially now that I'm single, because of just that feeling of being alone, And if I don't know how to manage it, I will say, hey, God, please remove this from me. Mm-hmm. What else can I do? Show me the way. And I am listening. And then I will just sit quietly and listen. And by the way, the answer doesn't show up in those 10 minutes, right? It's not on your timeline all the time. But it's almost like I say, placing the order with God. So like if you're going to go to Starbucks, you place your order, and if the order is not coming fast enough, do you get behind the counter and tell everyone to do it? Right? No, you have to be patient.
Yeah.
It might come right away or it might not. So it's really about asking and being patient.
Okay. And having, I think there's something about what you're sharing, that there's also something about having faith that it may not be in your timeline, let's say, but that I used to always say to clients, as long as we're continuing to do the work, I want you to think about this as like it's on its way to you, right? It's already on the UPS truck. It's a paved road. It's coming. And we have to continue doing the work. When you think about manifesting, how can tell everyone who's listening how they can find you?
If you go to lindseyellison.com, this book that I'm talking about, Blessings of a Breakup, you can actually get it for free. So I've converted it into a daily opt-in. So you'll get a blessing every day over the next 3 months. And so you can get it that way. If you're like, I love it so much, there's a link there where you can actually buy it, and it's an ebook, and it'll get downloaded to you. And of course, I have my own podcast, Unbreakable You. A Breakable You, how to break up without being broken. And then as well as Instagram, I'm sure you'll put that up there.
Yeah, we will put all of the things there. But I want to just say thank you so much for spending so much time with us today and for sharing what you've learned on this journey, because you've helped so many people and you continue to. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm so glad that we did this.
Thanks for having me.
Always.